Yes, Professor Valentina Zharkova, welcome to the BASES project live, and it's really good to see you. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. So, for the purposes of this, let's go back to 2019 when you showed your. We did a masterclass on that 2019,
Yeah, it was
and
ages.
I'm going to see if I can put myself up on this. So we did a masterclass for the BASES project, and I was very grateful. That was a very extensive and very detailed presentation. And the point about this is time has moved on, and you have a presentation to talk about that. So I'm recording you perfectly here. So do take it away, Valentina.
Okay.
How are you
So
doing anyway?
I'm doing good.
Good. That's good. And I like to see a smile on Valentina.
Yeah.
That's great. Professor Valentina Zharkova, welcome to the BASES Project Live. And it's, for the record, it's the 25th of March, 2025. Well, take it away. Thank you very much.
Okay, just remind you everyone what we are speaking about, what is the solar maximum and solar activity, what is the active sun. This is the kind of active sun you see, then you have a lot of bright points on the sun. When the sun is not active, like on the top, this picture from Soho 96, there are no much active regions, the sun is orange and nice. But when it goes to solar activity to the bottom, like in 1999 or 2013, or which was this year, we should have a lot of active regions and solar activity. This is maximum solar activity. So uh, previously, people had only views of the sun before invention of the telescope, or even with the small telescope. They observed the sun and the dark spots on it, which they call sunspots. So the sun, this is the photosphere of the sun, which is seen by visible light. You can watch it if you put glasses on your eyes, and these are enhancement of the sunspot. How they look like with the umbra inside and penumbra around it. And Wolf noted that the number of sunspots changes periodically on the solar surface, and he introduced the cycles of solar activity index, showing the number of the sunspot on the surface, and calculated from these years the number of spots over there. And then not only they calculated total number of sunspots shown in the bottom line, they also calculated how the sunspots are distributed on the surface of the sun from northern latitude to the southern latitude, and shown that the sunspot appear within the royal zone between plus minus 30 degrees of latitude. And then during the cycle, the sunspot slowly progress from this 30 degrees towards the uh, solar equator. And these latitudinal distributions are called butterfly diagrams. So this was the basis which we use for solar activity definition. Whether it's good or bad, it was the only one we had. So we have to stick with it. And what happened in the era last three solar cycles, last 40 years, people invented the magnetograph, which measure magnetic field of the sun. And they discovered that actually the sunspots are the places where large magnetic loops are embedded into the photosphere. So basically, the sunspots are the roots of these loops, like in the tree. So the tree is above, but we see only the roots because the temperature lower and they become darker. So magnetic field in sunspot is 1,000 times greater than surrounding area. They always come in pairs because obviously they're part of this same loop with opposite polarity. So one sunspot has to have northern polarity, another southern, and normally leading polarity is the one opposite to the polarity of the background magnetic field on the sun. So all sunspots in the same hemisphere have the same magnetic configuration. And what is happening? This is showing the solar magnetic field reversal. What is solar activity? During the solar minimum, this all magnetic field, let's say on the north, has northern polarity, blue colored, southern polarity, and no much features on the surface. But what is happening next 5-6 years before solar maximum, shown in the middle, we can see that slowly the polarities started migrating, changing. So southern polarity migrates towards the north, and northern polarity migrates to the south. And there will be some periods during the solar activity maximum when the north and south pole will have the same polarity before it's finished changed. But when we come to the next solar cycle, as you see on the right-hand side, now the northern hemisphere has the southern polarity and southern hemisphere has northern polarity. So the polarity change. This is so-called solar activity cycle defined by the solar dynamo, which created the waves generated in the base of the solar convective zone. And this is what happened when you got the magnetogram. So on top of the solar sunspots, we got this observation of magnetogram, daily observations with different accuracy resolution. This is magnetogram with the dark shows you northern polarity and light shows you southern polarity. So you see there are a lot of small dots and spots, but there are active regions which show you some spots of the opposite polarity. What Hathaway discovered when he built this magnetic field, background magnetic field from magnetogram, not particular sunspot, all background field when you measure from the whole disk, 1024 by 1024 pixels. When you build this magnetic field, suddenly he discovered that the background magnetic field also has some kind of butterfly diagram. So the let's say cycle 21, it was polarity, southern polarity on the northern hemisphere, northern in the southern, then cycle 22 changed polarity. So they move like butterfly diagrams, and this shows how the polarity changes because some sunspot or some magnetic field leaks towards the poles and change the pole polarity as I shown in the previous cartoon. So based on this one, knowing that the background magnetic field changes similar way like the magnetic field of sunspot, we wanted to compare how exactly they do change. So on the top, I built for cycle 23 solar background magnetic field, take from Wilcox Solar Observatory in Stanford with low resolution. So this magnetogram, they don't see sunspots because the resolution is 20 arc seconds. So the sunspot is smoothed over 20 arc second, will be very small magnetic field magnitude. At the bottom, it is the summary magnetic field in sunspot in each polarity. So blue is northern polarity, yellow or orange is southern polarity. What we see that the background field polarity is orange in the northern hemisphere and blue in the southern hemisphere in the royal zone between plus minus 30 degrees, which is opposite to the polarity, leading polarity of sunspot, which is northern blue in the northern hemisphere and orange in the southern hemisphere. So what we discovered that basically this background field, it modulates where sunspot can occur and how they move towards the equator during this cycle. It was very encouraging because it helped us to find like a different source to define solar activity, because our aim at that time, we done solar feature catalogs, 12 years of all the detection of sunspot and everything. And when we tried to produce automated solar index, it was very difficult to produce because the error bar is very big, because the area covered by sunspot is 1,000th of area of sun, and the errors brought are very strong. This is why we were looking for different other proxy, and this proxy background magnetic field turned out to be very good proxy. So this is what we look, okay, we see this magnetic field, but you can see that it is distributed very randomly, but if you look at the original magnetogram, it has a summary of any waves you can produce. They interfere, and on the surface, you see the summary. So how to separate which waves are produced? So we started looking at the history of physics, and reminded us this nice, brilliant prism, glass prism, in which from the left side we put the white light, which doesn't have wavelength, but because of different refraction law, on the right-hand side we get this brilliant rainbow, like shown in the bottom, where each wavelength has, each light has now clear wavelengths. We had red, we have yellow, green, blue, and so on until indigo. So what can act for magnetic field like this prism? It turned out there is a tool which can do it. It's principal component analysis, which allow you to define or find the eigenvalues, eigenvectors in the data produced, and detect the components of all the components which contribute to this magnetic field. So we did it. And to explain you this, on the left-hand side, we produce the eigenvalues of magnetic field of the sun derived from the full disk solar magnetogram in the 30 latitudinal bands for daily magnetograms. What we discovered that basically we have two, actually waves come in pairs. Like show, where's my, so what, it was a big surprise to discover that we have eigenvalues defining the strongest magnetic waves, shown on the left corners, two left drops. These are basically, these are two. They are classified by variance, how much data variance contribute to this point. So these 2 points contribute 39% of variance, or if you get to standard deviation, square root of 39 will be about 67%, 64. So this is what first pair of the strongest eigenvectors, which we looked at the first in the first paper. But later we discovered that we have also this another pair, two, and another pair. And then but over years, from 2015, we discovered this in 2015, we now know that these largest eigenvectors, eigenvalues produced by dipole magnetic sources like north and south, this second one is produced by quadruple magnetic sources, or 4 magnetic sources, and the other 2 sextuple and another 2 octuple. So what is shown on the right-hand side, it shows you resonance interaction of wind wave with the natural frequency of oscillation of the pole. It's nearby my house. It's a motorway M62, and it was year 2018 when we had strong gales, about 50 miles per hour. And obviously, this 50 miles produced the waves close to natural frequency of those poles. They are very solid metal poles. They are not plastic. But because they interfere at the resonance frequency, the wind makes these poles, you see, wave like they're like small green trees or something. I will come back to this point a bit later when I start showing you interference of the 2 waves which we produce. So what we come up from this point, that the sun actually run not a single dynamo wave on the magnetic field, but two dynamo waves. And these are the waves which we detected, the blue and the red one, which produced by magnetic poles, northern and southern magnetic poles. One is starting from southern hemisphere, another from northern, but they meet in the hemisphere which become more active. In the cycles, odd cycles, it will be northern hemisphere. In the even cycles, it will be southern hemisphere. And when these waves have the similar amplitude, they produce this resonance interaction and cause the maximum solar activity. So the vertical line in here shows that this is the data we used from the magnetic field from cycle 21, 22, 23. Now we expanded the data cycle 24. I will mention about it later. So what we discovered, there are two waves, and now they travel, they're slightly off phase. You see one phase already, wave blue like has maximum, and red has maximum a bit later, and the similar in the southern hemisphere. So these waves are slightly off phase. So what we managed to not only produce those waves, we managed to quantify them. We managed to find the analytical description describing these waves with two approximate cosine functions. I don't remember if I put cosines here. Let me see. No, I didn't put cosine, okay. So it was my previous presentation. I described you that we put through 5 cosine functions. And on this cycle 24, we managed to reproduce with our formula red solid line and blue line, and the one we discovered from the observations, which fit very well with the accuracy 97%. And then we expanded this function to the cycle 25 and 26, where we saw that the waves actually going into the opposite amplitude, opposite phases. So when the blue has maximum, the red has minimum, and vice versa in the cycle 26. What does it mean? Just to remind you that when the waves interfere, what happened if you never heard about Tacoma Bridge? It was a very nice bridge, Tacoma Narrows Bridge, built 1989. Built much earlier, and what happened that they forgotten to calculate natural frequency of this bridge, and turned out that natural frequency was close to the frequency of induced by the gale of 50 miles per hour, which very frequent in this particular area. And after that, this bridge, when the next gale came, this bridge, it was concrete, metal, very solid bridge, but it was destroyed completely, like it was an earthquake. So it collapsed absolutely. So this tells you that actually wave interaction is very powerful tool. And to explain you in mathematically what we are speaking about, here are two waves on the top with slightly different phase. So you see, when the waves are in phase, the amplitude increases. The resulting wave is in the bottom, blue one. So when the waves are in phase, the amplitude increases twice, but the waves in antiphase, the amplitude becomes zero. And this called, when the amplitude increases, called constructive interference, and the one amplitude drops when the phase is pi, destructive interference. And this is just the sum of two cosine functions, to be concrete. So this is what, knowing this knowledge, this is from my lecture notes for my students whom I teach waves in the physics module. So now we needed to calculate the summary curve. So I added these blue and red lines, obtained this summary curve, which shows that amplitude like decrease into cycle 26, but we don't know what does it mean before we look at comparison. So we reflected my southern amplitude, so this one, which is in the bottom, we put it the sign minus and put it on the top. And what we did for cycle 21, 23, we discovered that our modulus summary curve actually roughly represents solar activity index. Not exactly, but roughly. You see the huge fluctuation, dispersion of solar activity index, but they represents more or less closely. We reproduced it even recently, paper 2022, with Shepard expanded to cycle 24, and they found they still coincidence. So we thought we have a new index which can define solar activity, which is much more reliable because it derived from the eigenvectors of this magnetic field, and we have its mathematical formula. So when we build this summary curve towards cycle 25-26, we discovered the amplitude will be decreasing. And what is interesting, this is what is when we year 2025 here, the drop of the activity from maximum is very sharp. This is what we will be expecting in this year 25-26. Very sharply activity will drop, and we will have a few activity drops, increases, like here 3 maximum, and then the minimum between cycle 25 and 26. So what it means, the cycle 26 has amplitude very, very low. It's 70% of the amplitude of the other cycles. So basically, this is what gave us the clue that we entered the actually ground solar minimum, which lasts not only this cycle 25-26, but also cycle 27, which I speak a bit later. But I just introduced, I didn't speak 219 because we haven't done yet paper. But now we explored quadruple eigenvectors and their summary curve shown on the top, and compared this quadruple summary curve with the software soft X-ray index on solar flares. And it turned out the quadruple index defines the solar flare activity very nicely. You see the maxima appear exactly in the years when they observe maximum soft X-ray in solar flares, and which makes sense because this is a quadruple wave, so it has to be two set of loops that interfere and produce flares, so it makes a lot of sense. So now we come back, what we discovered. So we calculated this summary curve for 2000 years from 1200 to 3200, with oval here shown the data we used from the observations, and here we show that exactly the solar activity coming to ground solar minimum, because cycle 25, cycle 26, and 27, the amplitude is reduced very significantly. And when we look backwards, the similar reduction of amplitude was happening during Mount the minimum and back during the Wolf minimum as well. And the next, this modern ground solar minimum, 2020, 2053, is upon us. And the next one will be 2375, 2415 in this particular location, in this particular time. So basically, it is two waves interference, which I explained you in the pictures and cartoon, showing that when two waves run out of phase, they produce this envelope interference, and this result was press released and published at the National Astronomy Meeting. We gave interviews and then widely covered by media, if you can look at this. And this, what it says, that basically we entered ground solar minimum. And we try to verify the data, not only by at that time we didn't have much time. We have doing some bigger project on accelerated particles, but at least we look at the solar. Our curve is blue, and red are observation of large sunspots by Chinese in the from 1200 to 1500. And you can see that the observation is before the telescope was invented. And you see the observations fit very well our curve. And there's some absence of observation caused by severe disease in China, no observers, and the new dynasty arrived. They took all the resources building the Great Wall, so there's no observation either. So we compared our curve with the divine solar activity from biomass of carbon-14 in the terrestrial biomass, the woods and leaves and other shown by the red curve, which show you all the cycles which they observe. So this is our modern ground solar minimum, and then this is Maunder minimum, Wolf minimum, Oort minimum, even this one, this Homeric minimum. They're all here. The only difference is that they curve shown the Spora minimum in 1400, 1600, while in the Spora minimum, we see that it has to be maximum, the amplitude of the cycle maximum. So we look at this specifically in this particular area, and what we discovered that Spura minimum was actually the increase of carbon-14 came not from the sun. It was explosion of supernova Vela Junior, which is 600 light years from Earth, very close, which caused strong increase of the background. And because the age of when the carbon seen derived the ratio to the background, and people use the standard background, which is relevant now, they obviously had these big error bars. So obviously this minimum definitely is the one which they measured should be in the Maunder minimum, because it gives error bars 200, 300 years, exactly as we observed. So now to prove this point, we published a paper in arXiv. We shown that during the years when they claimed to be Spora minimum, there was very strongest auroras ever observed actually on Earth. And when you have auroras, the auroras are observed mostly during the solar maximum, where they have strong solar energetic particles. So this is one thing. Another thing, if you look at the temperature variation, they pretend they don't understand, but the temperature variation is at 1214, show maximum. This is the period where is maximum of temperature. So the temperature is reduced during minimum solar activity. If it was minimum, in the first per minimum, temperature should reduce, but it showed very clear maximum. So it was maximum. So we are correct. And they simply made a mistake defining the age. So now the same happened with the ice area, which is in Greenland is exactly the response to the solar. Greenland shown by this dashed line correspond the maximum solar activity. Only Antarctica shows the kind of minimum, because the Vela Junior with the elliptical latitude 55 degrees, very close to the southern hemisphere. This is why in northern hemisphere they didn't observe it, and they only observed when they sent the recent gamma ray observatory into the space, and they found remnant of this Vela Junior 500 years later, which has the strongest gamma ray in the sky. So obviously imagine how strong it was 500 years ago. We're simply lucky, the Milky Way and solar system simply lucky that this happened 600 light years from the Earth and not 500, because if it has happened 500, the Earth would be completely smitten by the radiation, nothing would left. So we got lucky. And here just confirmation what we got. In this ground solar minimum correspond Maunder minimum, Wolf minimum, Oort minimum, even Homeric minimum during the Roman Empire. And these are the variations which show you that two waves interfere and produce the solar activity on the surface because of the interference with the slight phase between them. So we see envelope curve of the interference, or summary curve of the interference of these two waves. So now we wanted to compare, this is what you haven't seen before. We done the published paper 2023 spectral analysis of the data. So we compared using wavelet the frequency and the period of oscillation for sunspots, and shown on the right hand side with the for the global wavelet. This is on the general wavelet, and they integrated over the time. Global wavelet show period 10.7 for sunspot, and the similar period 10.7 shows for module summary curve, which we reported in the Nature paper 2015 and Llandudno National Astronomy Meeting. So why they are different? Remember that the black curve showing the modulus summary curve of our new index not exactly coincide with sunspot number. It can be nature of the magnetic field they represent. On the left-hand side, I present the magnetic field. It is a colloidal magnetic field of the background sun. This is how it behaves over these years, calculated for the models we derived. On the right-hand side, it is toroidal magnetic field, the magnetic field which is stored inside the sunspot and which roots we see as sunspots. So you see they're quite different. So you cannot expect they will be similar. And from the logical viewpoint, you can see that the lower is the background magnetic field, the stronger could be magnetic field in the sunspot, which appear on the surface, which we see periodically in the dispersion of how many sunspots appear on the surface because of the weaker magnetic field in this cycle. Then we compared one-to-one the curves presenting solar activity. Our curve is a green one, and the sunspot curve derived by many scientists from 1700 to 2220 is red line. And you can see that in the 18th centuries, when observers were scattered and not agreed and everything, the correlation between our two curves is just 25%. There are some, you probably heard that in some sunspot, they have a duration of cycle 15 years. In some other duration is only 7 years. In some other 8 years. Obviously, people were very insecure and not agreeing what they're doing. But then we moved to 19th century when they started slightly improving. But in 18th century, another problem came up. They changed the time from Julian calendar to Gregorian, and it took about a whole, I don't know, 50 years to change in different countries. They keep changing in other ways. So this is why sometimes year presented in sunspot could refer to the previous year, like in the United Kingdom, in England at that time, the year started in April. So if we put year 1840 March, you don't know 1840 or 1839 because it definitely it has to be different. So and none of the observers put in which calendar they put year. So this is why the correlation slightly increased, become 56% between our data and theirs, but 56%. But then to 20th century, we got in the 20th, 21st century, the correlation came 67%, which is maximum we can get for the dipole magnetic field, because we didn't include yet quadruple, octuple, and others. So basically, we feel that this is a good solar activity index, which can be used. What advantage is that it has a formula which define activity. So you're not relying on whatever date or whatever observation or whatever accuracy, whatever anything. You have the formula, you can use it and compare what people have. So basically what we got new proxy of solar activity defined with principal component analysis. And the strongest two principal component cover then about 40% variance of data or 60% by standard deviation. And prediction of solar activity and shows the grand solar cycle with a period 350, 400 years. And we turn out, when we discovered, we were 5 years from start of the new ground solar minimum, which is already upon us, as you probably notice. And the prediction for 3,000, 10,000 year backwards fits very well grand minima and warming periods. So I skipped the bit which we calculated using solar dynamo layer, calculated two ways with slightly different frequency. This is the formula Elena Popova used for us. And what was nice that having two waves and producing the solar interior was confirmed by the helioseismic observation by HMI instrument board of Solar Dynamic Observatory. They published literally nearly simultaneously with us. We didn't know that the sun has two special region inside each hemisphere in which meridional circulation goes in opposite direction. This is blue one and the red one. And turn out when we calculated the solar dynamo waves, having difference only 1 meter per second between speed of blue and red one in this meridional circulation produces the observed cycle of 350 years, which I presented to you. So it doesn't put a lot of effort. It comes very naturally. The sun produces solar activity and simply does not recognize that on the surface we have zero, because sun produces what is shown by the black lines. The only thing these black lines go in, slightly off phase, and periodically one line runs away from another and produces this minima when the waves are in antiphase and produce minimum this blue line. And to find funniest formula, those who interested in mathematics, this is the solution of wave equation, the omega zero natural frequency, omega is forced frequency. So omega zero and forced, and you see, remember these pictures of waving poles on the M62 or destroyed Tacoma Bridge? This is because of it. When cosine omega and omega zero become close, then you have used the formula for the cosine, and this is what you produce this strong oscillation, and the amplitude of the waves defined by this sine function. This is why the envelope curve show the variations of amplitude, and then zero comes when the wave come in complete antiphase. Knowing this, we managed to reproduce with the dynamo models the observation for 2,000 years of solar activity, which first time was done and nicely reproduced general shape, a long cycle, expanded cycle, very strong vertical cycle, and so on. So basically, Elena Popova did a terrific job and reproduced, only because now we know the nature why it is produced, and we can reproduce the solar activity dynamo waves. So on top of this, she also managed to reproduce the butterfly diagrams, and this is top observed butterfly diagram when the sun maximum was 1720, between 17 and 1710, and you look it's 1720, 17 and 1710, exactly where butterfly diagram shows the maxima. And this butterfly diagram for the current cycle, which started. So we are here, we see that cycle 25 still produces some sunspots. This is the cycle 26, which doesn't produce much. This is where we will see a lot of decrease. And this is cycle 27, when the activity will be restored and come back to normal to the next ground solar cycle. What we speak in, why we speak in cycles are important and ground solar cycles are important. They're important because Lin et al. 95, they observed from biomass during the Mount the minimum that evidently the solar radiation during Mount the minimum was reduced from 1366 to 1363. Absolute value may be not important, but important the difference. They reduction of solar radiation by 3 watt per square meter. And here are results derived, how much it is reduced. Stan Hibler Lean, Shirley, and others. And so they show this, they mostly agree with one another. What it leads actually to the right graph, to the right top corner. You can see that temperature variation built by Lamb, Easterbrook, 2016, they show that during the minimal strong reduction of the temperature by 1 degree in average. So it is an average for the whole planet. So it doesn't mean that in each point it will be, you need to see how the average calculated. And then another reduction of coming during Dalton minima, and then increase of the temperature in the modern heat area, which was beginning of 50s and so on. So I looked and digged for the data, and I discovered the Schindel et al. Paper. They restored temperature during and after the minimum, and they shown the surface temperature of Earth was reduced over the globe. So now we see how they calculate this average temperature. At the bottom, we bought a color line, which shows reduction of temperature. Darkest blue is reduction by 1 degree, and darkest brown is increase by 1 degree. But mostly you see during the minimal strong reduction of temperature in the northern hemisphere from Canada to Northern America, in all Europe and Russia and Siberia. So Europe and Northern America went in the deep freeze during the minima. Alpine Glacier extended over valley farmland. Sea ice crept south from Arctics, and Danube and Thames rivers, canals in the Netherlands froze regularly. Why this happened? It is happened Schindel, the calculation that drop of temperature was related to drop abundance of ozone created by solar ultraviolet light in the stratosphere. And because its reduction of solar radiation reduced by 3 watt per square meter, then this reduction of the ozone actually affected planetary atmospheric waves. So when ozone is the standard level, on the left-hand side, this globe shows the stable jet stream flows in somewhere straight path. And this is why we have nice jet, Gulf Stream and others. Then when the ozone is reduced, it creates giant wiggles. And here you see the giant wiggles coming from the north, jet streams as shown the picture on the left. It kicks North Atlantic oscillations, a balance between a permanent low pressure system near Greenland and permanent high pressure system in the south, into negative phase. And this is what led to Europe become, and North of America become unusually cold during the minimum. So it's not like everywhere become the same. This is related to particular oscillation. Of course, they didn't know at that time about ENSO, El Nino, La Nina, southern oscillations, which now become subject of huge investigation because they also contribute to it. We simply did not know at that time in 2001, they didn't know how it contribute. But return back to our solar cycle, that you can see this is the plot from official Royal Observatory, Royal Belgium Observatory of solar increase of, steep growth of number of spotless day in cycle 25, which is much sharper than any cycle before. So the strongest increase was cycles 10 and 20 and 15 when we had Dalton minimum. But this one much sharper increase, which indicates we enter in the ground solar minimum. And we see ground solar minimum observation snows in Morocco, Spain, Ukraine, minus 2C and frost recorded in Amman, Arabia, first in 150 years. Obviously, prediction of James Hansen that New York City will be, West High motorway will be underwater by 2009 did not meet. There's nothing happened. We had early snow in Canada, September 2021, and snow January, February 24, and snow, endless snow in January, March 25, if you know what Canada means. So there was summer snow in south of Australia, the South Africa, blizzard in US and Canada, this was picture 22, 23, but this is Australian snow in late May, and in November it is like our late May, so it never had in and late May snow, but they had. And this is the recent, this January, we had the snow and frost in Texas, Florida, and Louisiana. And this is the temperature -11. The whole Gulf area was affected by strong snow and frost. So this is part of these wiggles, which come from the Arctics to the lower latitude, caused by reduction of ozone because sun entered in the ground solar minimum. And these are another snow in South Africa, 21, 23rd, September 23, which is the beginning of the spring. And the roads were blocked in South Africa. They never seen the snow. And I had some pictures with lions and giraffes standing among the snow, but I didn't put in the presentation. You can dig the dates, South Africa, you will see the picture. All the newspapers reported them. So it was also ice increase. Instead of decrease, they say will be melting. It is increased. We don't, and the moreover, Arctic ice thickness grows significantly. And people report recently was, I think, last month, it was reported that the period when the ships can travel in Arctic, not being frozen, keep reducing from the year 2010 until now. So basically, ice is growing in the Arctic, not decreasing. So basically, we're heading towards the ground solar minimum. We are already in it, and it will be progressing much quicker within next 30 years. And now even NOAA and NASA appeared to admit that Sun has entered full-blown ground solar minimum, which is cycle 25 and 24 were weakest in the 200 years. This is the comparison area covered by ice in Arctics. And these are my conclusions about ground solar minimum. So it started already. We are 2025, so it is 5 years. We see first sign, and the worst yet to come in 5 years when we got to the minimum between cycle 25, 26 from 30, 31. It will be the coldest period. So this is unique for solar terrestrial connection. For we have all these instruments watching sun. It will be interesting to observe because nobody observe apart from records ground solar minimum. So it will be extremely interesting. But what is also important that at that time we have jet direction changes, a lot of change in the Earth. There will be increase of volcanic and earthquake activities. We published paper that volcanic activity will be maximum in the cycle 26. So this will also reduce the temperature. An effect on terrestrial temperature will produce reduction TSI in variation of jets and volcanic activity. What it leads to the reduction of the vegetation period for all our food we grow. We need 3-4 months or 2 months for vegetables, for wheat, and suddenly this period will be very shortened. And the governments need to think either build real greenhouses and find the energy resources to heat them and to produce vegetables for their nation, or find the other lands which are not affected by this ground solar minimum and reduction of temperature, like North Africa and others, and build big vegetable farms in there. And by the way, Chinese buying the lands in the Northern Africa very, very quickly because they realize it is real thing and hoping to make big bucks selling the vegetables from there. So we need intergovernment efforts to avoid disasters because it's not only reduction of food and reduction for people, reduction food for animals. We need heating. We need supplies. If there will be snow, normal transportation will not work. And during the snow and frost, electric batteries stop working at all. You need to have proper fueled vehicles delivering if you have cleaned the roads. Or when it was cold in Great Britain in 1947. There was a nice program on BBC. It was cold and snowy for 1.5 months, and they showed the snow reached the size two-story building. People literally were stuck in their houses, and they couldn't even get supplies. People dropped supplies with the airplanes from the helicopters. But if it will be a volcanic eruption, even airplanes could not fly. So this gives you seriousness of situation which about to happen. And so this is what about ground solar minimum, which upon us, and it doesn't matter what they say, all this heating, all this global warming, if we had the similar CO2, it will not go anywhere, but we still have decrease of the temperature, which tells you that probably the temperature is actually governed not by the CO2 or greenhouse gases, but by the sun and its radiation produced for the terrestrial and other planetary atmospheres. So this is what we got, but the temperature was increasing indeed from the period of 1700 from Mount the minimum. This is bottom is the temperature line, how it is increasing in general. It increased approximately by 1 degree since that time, while this line shows variation associated with the local increase of solar activity and so on. So the first IPCC predicted the temperature will increase by 3 or 5 degrees, but then they reduced this prediction having 1.5. But when we looked at the variation, so here is why IPCC says that the solar activity is reducing the real solar activity index by sunspots shown by thin blue line and the average solar activity by thick blue line, while the temperature variations are shown by the red lines, and the thick line shows that the temperature is increasing. And because solar activity is decreasing and temperature is increasing, they started saying that, oh, then the temperature is not affected by the sun because the solar activity is decreasing. But they've forgotten one will simple thing, that the sun is the star and the earth is the planet which moves around the star. So we have, remember, we have our formula which has analytical expression. So we calculated our summary curve for 120,000 years backwards from now backwards. And then here's example of the summary curve built for last 12,000 years. And what we discovered that actually this grand solar minima, you see how they similar, quasi-similar, every 5 grand solar minima are very similar in shape. And was very strange why they're so similar. The first one increasing like triangle, then the second one is very high, narrow but high amplitude and so on. So we decided to see what causing this quasi-similarity. And when we look at this, we discovered that this zero line in here, actually it's not zero line, it oscillates. It becomes either closer to the northern magnetic polarity or to the southern, and has very nice cosine type variations. Not like inside the sun when the magnetic field, magnetic waves from dynamo have not exact shape. Here the shape is very precise with the period about 2,100 years. And suddenly we look at the observations of this solar radiance in the biomass of isotope C14, and we discovered, oh, yes, they report also this period about 2,000, 2,200 years in the trees, Reams et al., 2009. So we thought, okay, if we have this, where we are now. So we put in here, the blue is this oscillation of the baseline or the zero line. And it turned out the minimum was during the minimum, and this black line shows where we are now. So basically, this sun magnetic polarity of this summary curve becomes more inclined to the northern polarity, which means the sun become closer towards the Earth when Earth turned to the sun with the northern pole. When it happening, so we put also solar radiation. It turned out the increase of solar radiation also related to the same increase of zero baseline. And we evaluated in the paper 2018 that the increase of solar radiation will be probably higher than decrease during the minimum. It will be much higher, about nearly 1% or 0.22% or higher. And this will probably causing the increase of the temperature, which observed especially in the northern hemisphere and others part of the Earth. So this what, after we discovered this period and discovered that the increase of the temperature obviously associated with the increase of the solar radiance and increase of the northern inclination of the summary curve toward the northern polarity, we wanted to see which cycle can produce it, because it has to be orbital motion. So we look, this is our solar system. The sun is in the center, the planets around, and they rotate on the elliptic orbits following the Kepler law. And we look at the known cycles, so-called Milankovitch cycles, obliquity with axial tilt, which has period about 41,000 years, so 2,000 years not suitable. Then we have eccentricity, which gives you period about 100, 400,000 years, and precession index, apsidal index, and so on. These are all gives periods from 15 to 130,000 years, but none of them gives 2,000. So we needed to look elsewhere. And here what it came suddenly in papers on solar inertial motion. What is inertial motion? It is that the sun sits in the center of the mass of solar system due to variable position of giant planets. But these giant planets, not only sun attract gravitationally the planets to rotate about him, but these planets actually try to distract the sun from its focus in this barycenter of the solar system. So if it is solar system, the sun starts rotating about this barycenter on much smaller orbit than the planets, and this is called the solar inertial motion. And there's a special solar orbit simulator on the website. You can dig and find it, which shows you this is the cross in the center is where the focus of the barycenter, and the green line show how sun moves in different years, and you can see in different years it moves closer either to northern pole to the Earth or to the southern. And then it turned out that during the this millennium, the sun becomes closer to the Earth during this spring equinox from 23rd of March. Actually, the sun is now closest to us and will be closest until probably end of August, beginning of September. So this is why we have these strange orbits. So these are orbits of the sun instead of what it should be. And it shows the sun wobbles. Actually, this wobbling star is the main actually attribute when the people look for exoplanets. When they look at the data and when they see the star luminosity oscillates, they understand it's wobbling star, it has to have planetary system. And this is why they look at the system around this star. So what is happening? We reported that here is spring equinox, and here the sun coming from March until mid-end of summer, the sun much closer to the northern hemisphere than to the southern, and we have increase of the temperature. And this caused by the gravitation of Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. At that time, I didn't use the calculation, and the people, anthropogenic global warming people, and especially Mr. Rice from Edinburgh University, started screaming, no, the sun moves indeed. They can't deny the sun moves on these small orbits, about two diameters of the sun. Actually, not very small, pretty large, because but these 2,000 years they move pretty slow. They said the Earth moves following the sun, which is not true. The Earth's orbit is very stable and it doesn't move so quickly like sun moves. So this is not correct. And but they retracted my paper, and when sitting on the lockdown, I looked at the NASA ephemeris of the distances Sun and Earth in 600, 1600, 1600, 2600, and then published the book chapter showing that indeed our suggestion, which was used as a base to retract the paper, that the distance between Sun and Earth changes, the Sun becomes closer to the Earth during the March to August, is true. And here you see it started moving from 600, but much strongest movement is in this millennium, 1700, moving closer and closer, which means the temperature. So this is the distance changing. What is more interesting, you see, if in the previous millennium, our summer solstice was 20th of June or 25th of some, in this millennium, look at that. Where is our summer solstice? Our summer solstice is now in July. Actually, the shortest distance was 5th of July this year, will be 7th in the next year. And by year 2600, the summer solstice will be on the 16th of July. So this is what is happening. The sun becoming closer, and this is why the temperature is increasing. And in the book chapter, to simplify the task, I subtracted and put not only distances, but the difference of the distances. So here you see the difference between the distances in the millennium 600, 1600, and 1600, 1700. And this is distance difference up to 0.11 thousandths of astronomical unit, as we predicted in the paper. So basically, this is the reason why we have this global warming, because the sun becomes closer and heats the atmosphere. Not only it heats the northern hemisphere, in March, it's still the part of the sun which is inclined to, part of the Earth which is inclined to the sun is actually the southern hemisphere and equatorial, which mostly ocean. And this is where in play become very strongly this El Nino La Nina southern oscillation, which basically affects and change the climate on the Earth, producing the ocean become hotter, and the heat travels from the ocean toward the other parts of the planet. So in order to prove this, I needed to calculate the solar radiance. So now I restore this picture and show that whatever Mr. Rice and others anthropogenic global people said is not working. The distance changed, and it is proven by ephemeris of the NASA and also ephemeris by Paris Meudon Observatory, which have the similar 7 digit after comma, the similar with Americans. So this is the correct definition. What is happening that they now, instead of aphelium and perihelium, are coming not on the longest axis, but intermediate axis. So aphelium become aphelion closer to the Earth, and this is why the temperature in the northern hemisphere increases much stronger. And perihelium, which is 16 January 2600, will be become also much closer than it should be. And this is why we have increase of the temperature. And this confirmed by increase of the solar radiation increase. You can see the numbers from 56 to 60 in January, and then increase much stronger during the summer. And to put the things that the maximum in this millennium, our maximum is during July, when actually, if it is solar radiation maximum in July, when the Earth is much closer to the sun than it should be in aphelion on the largest orbit. This is why we have increase of the temperature. And I compared the increase of the temperature. Again, this tells you how you cannot average everything. So what people do, those who calculate, they try to compare variation, TSI variations into millennium from 600 to 2600. They calculate average per month. Look at this, average per month. So this is the variation of solar radiance per month. This is average per month. So if you put average per month, it cannot be calculated average, because to calculate average, it has to be Gaussian distribution, bump-like distribution. This is nothing like bump-like distribution. So you see that variations of the solar radiance cannot be averaged. So when they calculate average, you miss most of the radiation, and they indeed produce that increase of radiation only about 1.5 watt per square meter. What I did, I calculated whole radiation per every month altogether and whole radiation per year, and plot it on the right plot. And you see in Millennium 1, the radiation was decreased, but in Millennium 2, at this point it's 2020 specifically date, it increased by 20 watt per square meter. 20 watt per square meter were deposited more into the ocean and into our atmosphere. What they say that the maximum deposition of the Earth, of the sun, is 3 watt per square meter. We have extra 20. Okay, we can split them between two hemispheres, 10 and 10, but still huge increase. And nowhere in any IPCC model they consider the solar forcing. And they instead of finding some imaginary forcing coming from greenhouse gases, which have nothing to do, just simply wrongly accused of them, because CO2 is a very good gas. It produces a lot of greeneries in garden centers. Every garden center puts CO2 to have better greenery. So the extra solar forcing caused by gravitation of planet, which is likely reason or main part of global warming. So this is the main interest. And what will be important to know that independently, it was happened before we discovered this gravitation and solar inertial motion. The Hardy in 2017, he tried to see how increase of solar radiance to 5 watt per square meter, how would it change ratio between heating by sun and by CO2, and turn out that increase only by 5 will give increase of temperature of 0.44%, 60% increase will be by sun. And then in their own models, it will be increased by CO2 40%. But remember that I found that increase of solar radiance is minimum 10. So you multiply 10. I am confident now that increase of solar warming warming of the terrestrial temperature comes mostly from the sun become closer. What is the problem? How a PCC can account for extra heating from CO2? They missed when integrating the emission of CO2, because if they missed solar emission, they needed to find some different source which erroneously would put this increase of the emission. What they did, this is our our Earth's atmosphere. So we don't have sources of heating on the Earth apart from source come from sun. If we don't have sun a few days, it become cold, and so the Earth's atmosphere doesn't produce any heating. It only absorbs solar radiation, either UV or visible, or infrared and then re-emits it. This is what is happening. And this is what is the main problem, because many people who try to interpret the terrestrial atmosphere suddenly decide to use the black body intensity formula, which designed for black body, which emits its own radiation, but the Earth doesn't emit its own radiation. It's only scatter the solar radiation. So you see the difference, that when people use their own formula for for interpretation, you can come with a lot of different discoveries, because this is not the right physics. So energy transfer on Earth can be done by radiation from the sun, some conduction, and some convection, like tea heating the air or some battery. So if you look transfer of radiation, this is the main source, because transfer electromagnetic radiation, especially UV radiation, is very high energy radiation, short wavelength radiation, and Earth heated by this process and heated various substances, dirt, rocks, water, concrete, sand, and everything. This is how energy is transmitted. And energy transfer by conduction requires that one substance to another, very effective in heating metals, but air is very poor conductor, not suitable. The same energy transfer from convection. It is more like related to fluid, but air in atmosphere had to act as a fluid. And but definitely it is not thermodynamic equilibrium when people assume using Boltzmann formula or using the Planck formula for intensity. So what is wrong with these guys who put CO2 as the main source of heating? I explain you. The main source problem, the problem is that the atmosphere is opaque in the radiation of CO2. So when atmosphere has molecules, the molecule absorb the radiation of the sun, scatter it, and then you have the infrared radiation coming from beneath, and this atmosphere become opaque into this radiation, infrared radiation coming from CO2. So to prove it, there were publications shown that this is optical thickness of the CO2 with the red, which reads about 400, and optical thickness of water vapor, which 500. What is optical thickness? So if you molecule CO2 absorbs like 10 minus 12 absorption coefficient, 10 minus 12 particles per square centimeter. So you need to have particles on line of sight 10 to 12 to get optical thickness is 1. So if you have 10 to 12, you have optical thickness 1 at the bottom. To get 400, you need 400 multiple by 10 to 12 particles. But if you have such a large number of particles, you cannot calculate your intensity by simply adding the emission from each molecule. You need to use radiative transfer formula. You need to integrate it with the E2 function, which is exponential function. And this exponential function depends on the optical thickness. And when optical thickness is very large, it is minus E. So you have intensity multiple by E to the power of minus tau. If tau greater than 1, all the emission is absolutely equal to 0, which comes out from the layer. So only emission from the layer equal to optical thickness 1 can leave this media, and this is what is happening. So they cannot add emission from, it doesn't matter how much CO2 molecules will be in atmosphere. What will happen that this emission is saturated. So if optical thickness, here's an example, radiative transfer in action, it's shown in this particular link if you're interested. So if you put radiation into the particular media and put optical thickness is equal 1, then increase of emission, which come in red outside, will be linearly increasing when optical thickness less than or equal 1. But if optical thickness in this, or number of particles in this media is become much higher, like I shown, 400 by 10 to 12 particles, so optical thickness is 400, the the emission which come in from this media is saturated by the emission which come in from the layer with optical thickness 1. So basically, this guy made classic mathematical error. Instead of using integral, multiple by exponential, they use summation without integral, and this is why they overestimated input from CO2, which in reality will be saturated and nothing will happen. So you need only sun which can heat the atmosphere to these temperatures. And this is what brings us back to the curve that increase of this temperature will be continuing. It doesn't matter what they say. They produce this local fluctuation related to solar cycles and try to say the temperature increase. It doesn't matter. The increase of the temperature owing to the solar inertial motion will continue until cycle 20, until 2600, next 500 years. It doesn't matter what we do, whether we put a lot of CO2 to increase or reduce CO2 completely. The sun even closer to us, we know that it is even inertial motion. It wouldn't move much within next, will be coming only closer to us, but the temperature will still be increasing, and it will be increasing by 2.5, 3 degrees. So, and modulus summary curve shows you that our main problem for our generation is not these 500 years which are ahead of us when the sun becoming closer and closer. This Earth-Sun system had this cycle called Halstead cycle, 2,200 years cycle, and it happened for the last 120,000 years, at least 60 times. But the Earth is still here. Nothing happened. There were no humans. It will survive. There's adjusted how to survive it. The only thing is now some human pretending to be smart when they are not, and putting some error calculation at the big discovery. But this causes more harm than help, because it doesn't matter what we do. Our main problem is actually this grand solar minimum, which is already upon us, which we are seeing here. Terrestrial temperature will decrease about this grand solar minimum. It doesn't matter whether the sun is closer to us or we get net zero. It will not happen. It still will be cold and still will be coming cold. This is what our main problem, this reduction of solar activity and reduction of solar radiation coming to Earth and to other planets. By the way, when we had global warming on the Earth, which I made my first talk for public appearance in 2007, I discovered that global warming was also observed on Mars and Jupiter, and somehow they just ignore it, like it is only Earth producing. But if we have global warming on Mars and Jupiter, definitely not coming from the Earth. We are not that powerful to heat other planets. So definitely the global warming will be actually a problem for next generations of other people. For our generation and the next generation, the main problem will be this grand solar minimum, which is upon us, which already started showing, and we need to start thinking how to provide energy resources and how to provide food for people in each country. And remember, the temperature will be still increasing by 2.5, 3 degrees by 2500 or 26, and this is nothing we can do. Just the sun gives us these 30 years to figure out how to heat us and to figure out how to live and adjust ourselves, how to live with the increased temperature and global warming, which is absolutely natural. To tell you why it is natural, if you look at history of Scotland, I live in Scotland for 8 years and got tours for tourists, and I know for a fact there are places where in Scotland they had nice Roman baths, stones heated by sun, and they had big wineries in Scotland in the beginning of Anno Domini 300, 400, when they had very hot weather in Scotland, which means we are heading toward the same period in 2600 if you take 1,200 years to half of it. So this is the thing which come naturally. We just need to adjust that we're part of the celestial bodies, and something doesn't depend on us. What depend on us, we need to prepare how to feed people and help them to survive. And 8 billions of people is not a huge amount. Many places in the earth are underpopulated. So this is what basically I wanted to say. And is the my main conclusion is, yes, global warming is natural. And I'm sure these poor greenhouse gases have nothing to do with it, for looking at the numbers. But what is most important, apart from global warming, most important is this mini ice age, which is upon us. And when it starts snowing and no supplies, you will see that it's much more dangerous than to have heating. We need to prepare. Thank you. Hello?
Hello, thank you very much indeed. Do you want to stop sharing?
Yes, I will stop
Good.
sharing.
This is absolutely, I'm going to put myself up so you can see that.
Okay.
What do you feel with the political situation? There are changes in that, but where do you feel is your voice being heard by the right people?
Yes, I'm part of the Clintel group. I went to the meeting in Prague where I reported this, and many people in the government, Czech government representative was there on my talk, and they were very supportive. They understood that, because I'm giving them examples straight from the life. And whatever they say, global warming, but if it is snowing and minus 11 in Texas, you can call it global warming.
Now, there was some kind of a governmental advisory committee during the week, or possibly last week, and the founder of Greenpeace was there and dismissing the whole CO2 thing. Were you across that, or I wasn't able to get fully acquainted with that, but it seems that Parliament is holding committees on this.
I have links, people contacting me and then interfering with MPs and others, especially again. I gave a list to them of MPs, so they're operating with my data, my talks, and my presentation on YouTube, and they're trying to deliver the reality. So global warming is good, but it is for another 500 years. And for our generation, and especially for this government, next 5 years, when the solar activity is dropping very dramatically, it will be main problem actually to feed and heat the nation. This is the main. They need to think about it.
I have to say that the local politics and the way that things are going with our governmental decisions isn't encouraging on that level.
Yeah, I agree. When I listened to Miliband, I thought he will put in stone probably his idiotic ideas. So what can I say? The nature will come and prove them wrong. So this is it. And many people will suffer if they don't listen. But I delivered many talks in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, in Leicester, and London. So people interested to know the facts, and especially when we reported our result in London 2015, it was a huge wave of interviews, and for until 2018 we were the main thing which appear when you put Google, but then anthropogenic global warming people probably paid Google to move us to the second or third screen and put themselves forward. But doesn't matter, they move us. The nature doesn't move because the cold comes straight on us in every part of the planet. And I'm popular. People send me emails showing it was snow. Recently, I got snow in New Zealand, which they got to the autumn. Beginning of autumn, this end of summer, they had very cold weather and snow in New Zealand in the middle latitude there. So definitely people keep informing, and I wouldn't probably gather this result myself, but because I made so many public appearances, people watch me. You can watch interview also on Tom Nelson podcast, number interview 278. Within month, it collected 39,000 views. So definitely people understanding that what I'm saying, this is what they see, and contradicts to what anthropogenic global warming people saying. And again, if we have this ice age, which I'm sure we do, it proves undoubtedly that only temperature variations we have on Earth are introduced by the sun, because we don't reduce CO2, it is still there. We don't become further from the sun because it's still already close to us because it causes global warming. So either their model or my suggestion, it is not changing. But if the temperature is dropping, it means the sun's sending us less radiation. So it doesn't matter how sun is close. You can have your boiler sitting, in embrace with you, but if it is not switched on, you wouldn't feel any heat. So this is the thing.
Well, there's a huge push for solar power. Many of these solar farms, I noticed, do not have high voltage transformers, so they can contribute back to the grid. So I suspect that they are merely there for show. And secondly, the contracts for wind farms, people don't want to have another contractor, and they're failing.
Oh yeah, wind farms is, I would say, it's a scam because first of all, it is not constantly producing electricity, and when it is frosty, normally it is no wind, or very strong wind farms are not working, and their lifetime is only 20 years. By that time, the blades, you cannot even dismiss them. There will be cemeteries of blades which are not degradable, and they not reoccupate. They do not repay the money to do these blades. You need to produce a lot of fossil fuel production. What they spend on fossil fuel on these windmills does not occupy over the lifetime of windmills. So it was a huge disaster, but moreover, when we need electricity, we need after 4 p.m. when everyone is at home and when there's no wind or solar panels, no sun. So we need electricity in the evening. And none of these solar batteries or windmills working in the evening. So it doesn't matter.
I mean, the solar cells, a lot of them failed in Wales, but that's a bit of a joke, failed in Wales. But like Texas, a lot of them smashed with the winds. Are you familiar with the volcanic eruption in the southern hemisphere, the Tonga eruption,
Yes,
and another
yes,
major volcanic eruption?
Yeah.
Is this directly caused by the issues that you've just described?
We published paper this year that actually the orbital motion causes volcanic eruption, especially underwater volcanic eruption, which heat ocean from beneath. And this is why 25% of ocean heating come from beneath with this orbital motion of the sun. And this is why we have increase of the temperature. So definitely volcanic eruptions are significant players in the whole system, air, ocean, air, and temperature. It's true.
And the movement of the magnetic poles, I gather that the official figures on that have been suppressed, but they seem to be very substantially off from north, only maybe 100 degrees between north and south. North Pole heading towards Siberia, the South Pole heading towards Australia.
Yeah, it is.
This, as I understand it, means that we're getting a lot less protection from the Earth's magnetic field at a time when we're getting more radiation.
Well, it is true. Yeah. And this tells us that not a bit depends on us. We live in the system which acts for itself as planetary system, and the poles they normally change the directions, like in any dynamo. Planetary dynamo also have swapping of the poles every 6,000 years, and there is a theory that we are lucky not only have this ground solar minimum, we also have swap of poles in the next 10-20 years. So maybe it's true. What cataclysm will be on Earth, I don't know. I need to look people from the terrestrial physics planetary physics. They're trying to get me involved and do some calculations, Jenny Beckov effect and others. I still didn't have time. I'm finishing my monograph on high energy particles. Hopefully in a month, when I free it and submit to the editors, I'll look at something. But definitely we have a big players in action, and these are not humans for sure. It is solar magnetic field, it is Earth magnetic field, and Earth magma inside. It is very important.
Where do you think? I mean, you're up there in sunny the north of England, there, Northumbria. Would you be planning to move? And if so, where would you feel you'd best go and move to?
No, yeah, I moved once from one country to another. It is very big shock. It is not easier. Here you know where it is. I thought I would move to maybe Spain, but when you come to Spain, they're so different. You need to move to get used to this life, and not in the time when the cataclysm. So maybe I'll start eating less and just I will put a stove into my house. I have woods next to me. I live close to the forest, so we'll do food and I start growing some food in my garden, for example. So at the moment,
I've talked to some other people, and they feel that one of the solutions is simply to change the species of crops. I mean, they grow a lot of grain and stuff in Norway and the northern climes, but they use a different species of agriculture. Do you think that would help? I mean, farming's under a huge amount of attack at the moment as well by the government.
Yes, yeah, and this is unexcusable because now we need our own farmers because we might not have this luxury of transportation. The sea, the North Sea can be frozen, the roads can be snowed, and people cannot move. All these railway stations, which are now electrical, will not be run because not enough electricity. In the 1947, they had steam engines. They put coal, and it was running. What they put now, some of the trains are diesel, but not many of them. So this why you need to have a little bit your B plan for your own country, and our farmers, our B plan, and we have to cherish them and carry them in our arms, thinking then they know how to feed the nation.
What about Miliband? I mean, you mentioned his name. I mean, have you had any impact with him in his department?
No, I can't speak with Miliband.
Well,
no. I have people who are speaking with them, and I have people in House of Lords who are carrying forward my ideas. So I have people. I hope at some stage I'm happy to offer them the. Hello.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, I don't remember where I put you. Okay, and I'm happy to offer them the talk in the Westminster to explain everything if they're willing to listen. Now, when the Trump came to United States with those his negatives, I'm not big supporter of him, but the positive thing that at least he will be thinking about energy resources and food for the nation, and probably other nations will follow him. Now, Argentina changed the plea and they started thinking about own energy resources and not blaming fossil fuel. And the same Norway, they disconnected Norway electric grid from the Europe, not to be dependent on them. They can supply everything energy for them. So these are things people start waking up, understanding the reality.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I have a lot of friends in Norway. I love the place a lot. They blame the prices of electricity for them going up because of the connector to Britain.
Yeah, kind of.
But that's another topic.
Yeah, but again, do you remember that this huge, they put batteries and they put battery farms, and there's farms keeping the like energy storages. These farms can feed only 2 hours. So they're not they're not usable for 2 hours. The night is not 2 hours. The night is normally in winter 10 hours. You need this one. And it means that you need constant electricity. You need probably uncover the coal mines and start reproducing the coal stations.
Well, I gather that they're celebrating blowing up coal-fired power stations in the UK.
Yeah, but
They're
they
not
now
building
they
anything
need to
new.
come back because otherwise we will not have enough energy. Even when, remember, we had cold snatch beginning of January, it was 1 week or 10 days. We were that close to actually cut off electricity because not enough electricity for the power plants and the other distractions. Because the stations are designed that people during the day are working in the offices, so there's no electricity consumed by private sector. But if it is snow and cold, people will be sitting at home and consuming electricity, and there's no enough electricity to supply the industry and the people.
And they're forcing people to stop having stoves and penalties and things like that. We have, I think, bad people in charge, and we have a problem there.
Well, yeah, we have a problem.
Well, it's good to see you, Valentina, and it's good to see you smile, even though your message is very serious. And may you be applauded for your efforts.
Yeah, I'm trying.
I'm a huge fan of your work, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm trying to raise awareness so it doesn't come as complete unexpected, so people do understand what is going on. And I'm not paid by any companies. It's just my pure research. I got it absolutely out of the blue as a part of curiosity, because my main subject of research is high energy particles. So anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and bless you. And we'll call that a day on this rare live that we've done. I haven't been done a live from here for. We had a little bit of a problem where two computers were sharing with each other. That's why we couldn't see each other.
When you publish, can you give me the link? I want to publish on my website.
Yes, I'll get this edited, and we've done the live, and I'll certainly be doing the edit, and
Okay.
and that'll be marvelous.
Okay.
And bless you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
So, cheerio.
Bye.